The rain didn't simply fall, it slammed against the earth. Sheets of water battered the cracked pavement, rushing into the gutters as though the sky itself had ripped open. Streetlights flickered weakly, their dim halos struggling against the storm. On that narrow road, a girl of no more than 10 sat shivering in the chaos, her thin arms locked tightly around a worn-out doll. Her name was Sophie. Her clothes clung to her skin, soaked through, and her dark hair stuck to her cheeks. Her lips quivered, but no sound escaped. Around her, damp cardboard boxes buckled under the downpour, spilling clothing into the street like discarded pieces of a life. Moments earlier, her landlord, a thick-set man with a cruel voice, had thrown everything outside. His last words still rang in the night, "You're not my problem anymore." Then the door slammed, leaving Sophie alone to face the storm. She didn't scream. She didn't wail. She only pulled the doll closer, pressing its sodden fabric against her face as though it could protect her. Yet her eyes betrayed her silence, wide, frightened, but burning with a fragile spark of defiance in a child already forced to endure too much. From down the road came the low growl of an engine. An old pickup crept along the deserted street, its headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Behind the wheel sat Daniel Hayes, a man carrying the silence of war as if it were stitched into his very skin. Once a soldier, now a hollow figure in his own town, he drove with the detached calm of someone who had long since stopped looking for purpose. Beside him sat Shadow, a black and tan German shepherd whose eyes gleamed even in the dark. Usually calm, the dog rode quietly as Daniel's steady companion. But now, Shadow's body stiffened. His ears shot up. A deep rumble rose from his chest, breaking into sharp, urgent barks that rattled the windows. Daniel's brow furrowed. "What is it, boy?" Shadow clawed at the glass, his whole frame leaning toward the storm outside. Then Daniel saw her, the tiny figure, drenched and trembling, clutching a doll in the rain. For a heartbeat, he thought about driving on. This wasn't his fight. He had spent years teaching himself not to interfere, but Shadow decided for him. With a fierce bark, the dog lunged forward, pawing at the door, insisting they stop. Daniel exhaled sharply, tightened his jaw, and pulled the truck over. He didn't know it yet, but the instant Shadow leapt into the storm, both his life and Sophie's shifted forever. The rain swallowed Daniel as soon as he stepped out. His jacket clung heavy against his shoulders, but Shadow was already ahead, racing through the torrent with unwavering purpose. Sophie recoiled as the large German shepherd closed the gap. She scrambled backward, clutching her doll with both hands, her lips forming a silent plea. "Don't hurt me." But Shadow didn't attack. He slowed to a halt just inches away, lowered his head, and gently pressed his cold nose into her trembling hand. Then, with quiet certainty, he nestled his heavy chin into her palm. Her reaction was instant. Sophie froze, wide-eyed, before a sob broke free from deep inside her chest. Instead of pulling away, she threw her arms around the dog's thick neck, burying her face into his fur as if she had been waiting for him all along. Shadow stood steady, his tail swaying once in calm reassurance, accepting her weight. Daniel stopped a few paces away, staring in disbelief. Shadow had never done this with anyone. The dog was disciplined, aloof, never one to seek comfort or allow strangers close. And yet, here he was, offering it freely, as if he somehow knew her. Through the pounding rain, Sophie's voice quivered. He smells just like Dad's dog." Her small hands clung tighter to Shadow's coat. He used to do this too. He rested his chin in her palm. It was the same trick her father had once taught. Daniel's chest tightened, old memories tearing their way to the surface. Michael, his comrade, his friend, had once sat in the barracks laughing, bragging about the German Shepherd pup he had trained with a special move. That same move was now being repeated by Shadow all these years later with Michael's daughter. A flash of lightning split the sky, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt his walls crumble. This was no coincidence. It was a thread of the past pulled tight through time and storm, binding him to the trembling little girl before him. He stepped closer, his voice rough but firm with authority. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a request. It was the first command he had spoken in years, born not from duty, but from the unspoken signal of his loyal dog. Daniel's cabin was small, its wooden beams creaking under the weight of the storm. Inside, the scent of damp pine and smoke lingered as flames licked at the hearth. Sophie sat rigid on a chair, swallowed by a blanket far too big for her. Shadow lay at her feet, ever watchful, his amber eyes fixed on her face. Daniel busied himself with the fire, his hands moving automatically, as though stoking the flames could quiet the storm of questions inside him. Silence filled the room. It was Sophie who finally broke it. Her voice was faint, fragile, but carried the weight of years no child should have endured. "My dad had a dog like him," she whispered, fingers tangled in Shadow's fur. "His name was Rex. When I was sad, he'd rest his chin in my hand. Dad said he taught him that Daniel froze. The memory slammed into him. Michael, grinning ear to ear, holding up a photo of a floppy-eared German Shepherd pup. I taught him a trick," Michael had said proudly. "He'll put his chin right in your palm. Works every time. Melts your heart." And now, as if to prove it, Shadow pressed his head more firmly into Sophie's lap, repeating the same gesture Michael had once boasted about. Daniel's breath caught. He turned, his face lined with disbelief. "Your father, what was his name?" Sophie looked up, her eyes wide in the firelight. "Michael Hayes," she whispered. The name struck Daniel like a blow. He stumbled back a step, gripping the mantel for support. Michael, his brother in arms, the man who never made it home. His gaze shifted from Sophie to Shadow, loyally guarding her, and then to the flickering flames. Buried memories roared back, the firefight, the explosion, and the promise he had whispered to his dying friend. "I'll look after them." He had failed, until now. Outside, the storm eased into a steady drizzle, but inside the cabin, the air was sharp with tension. Sophie sat curled on the couch, Shadow stretched across her feet like a living shield. Her voice trembled, barely audible. "After Mom died, I had nowhere else to go. Richard said he'd take care of me, but he only wanted Dad's money. He kept it all. And when I asked..." Her words faltered. She tugged up her sleeve, revealing faint bruises on her arm. "He did this." Daniel's jaw clenched hard, the firelight catching the hardened lines of his face. The anger of a soldier long buried surged to the surface. Before he could speak, the crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. Headlights swept across the window. Shadow leapt up, ears sharp, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. Daniel was already moving toward the door. The sound that followed wasn't a knock, it was a pounding. 3 heavy blows shook the frame. Then came a voice dripping with mockery. "Hayes, I know she's in there. Hand her over, she belongs to me." Daniel yanked the cabin door open. Richard stood on the porch, rain plastering his greasy hair to his skull, his massive frame crowding the doorway. His eyes fixed on Sophie, who was peeking out from behind Daniel's shoulder. "Come here, girl!" Sophie whimpered and shrank back. Before Daniel could move, Shadow was already there, muscle and instinct planting himself squarely between Sophie and Richard. His lips curled, teeth flashing, the growl in his throat slicing through the storm's roar. Richard sneered, "Call off your mutt, soldier, or I'll put him down myself." Daniel's reply was steady, firm, the kind of command voice that had once carried across battlefields. "You're not taking her anywhere." Richard stepped forward, testing his resolve. But Shadow's snarl deepened, primal and promising blood if the man dared to move closer. For a flicker of a moment, Richard's bravado cracked. His eyes shifted, revealing the coward hiding beneath his anger. He spat onto the porch, hatred in his gaze. "This isn't over." Then he turned and stomped back into the night. The door slammed shut, leaving the cabin in tense silence, broken only by Sophie's soft sobs and the low rumble of Shadow's protective growl. That night, Daniel realized hiding Sophie wouldn't be enough. If Richard truly controlled her father's money and benefits, there had to be proof somewhere. Something Richard never meant anyone to uncover. Without it, the law would side with him. Daniel called in a favor. Within hours, 2 old comrades arrived. Corporal Mason, lean and sharp-eyed, and Sergeant Torres, broad and steady as a mountain. Both had served under Daniel's command. When Sophie saw the strangers, she clung to Shadow's fur. But the quiet respect in the men's faces reassured her. Later, gathered around the fire, Daniel spoke plainly. "We need evidence. Contracts, bank records, anything that shows what Richard took. Without it, a lawyer can't touch him." Sophie's shoulders sagged. "It's gone. He told me he burned it all." Daniel didn't answer. He glanced at Shadow, who flicked his ears at the sound of Richard's name. Deep down, Daniel trusted the dog's instincts more than Richard's threats. The following night, under the cover of darkness, they set out. The rain had turned the ground into sucking mud, each step heavy. Shadow led the way, nose close to the earth, stopping and starting with uncanny precision. Richard's house loomed ahead, dark and quiet, except for the faint glow of a garage light. "He's out," Mason whispered. "We've got a window." The men slipped into the yard, keeping low in the shadows. Daniel's chest tightened, not from fear for himself, but from the weight of Sophie's future riding on their mission. Suddenly, Shadow halted near a side door that led down into the basement. He whined, pawing at the wood. Torres pried it open with a crowbar, and they descended into the damp, stale air below. The basement reeked of mildew and gasoline. Broken furniture, rusted tools, and piles of junk made the place look abandoned. Mason muttered under his breath, "Nothing here." Just trash, but Shadow wasn't finished. He circled once, then froze, his tail stiff. He pressed his nose against a battered trunk shoved against the far wall and let out a sharp, commanding bark. Daniel rushed forward, snapping the rotten lock and heaving the lid open. Beneath rags and scraps, he found a bulging folder. His hands shook as he opened it. Contracts, forged letters, bank statements, proof, everything they needed. When Daniel looked up, Shadow was sitting calmly, eyes locked on him, chest steady as though saying, "Job done." For the first time in years, Daniel felt purpose ignite in him again, hot, clear, and alive. Richard had buried the truth. Shadow had unearthed it. The courthouse carried the faint scent of polished wood and old paper, a place where futures were decided by evidence and testimony. Sophie sat at the plaintiff's table, her legs dangling above the floor. Shadow rested at her side, chin on his paws, calm but vigilant. Behind them, Daniel sat quietly, his solid presence a shield of reassurance. Richard entered with the arrogance of a man convinced of his own invincibility. His tailored suit strained against his heavy frame, and a smirk lingered on his lips as he slid into his seat. When his eyes landed on Sophie, that smirk hardened into cold contempt. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a commanding presence, called the courtroom to order. This hearing will determine the rightful guardian of Sophie Hayes and review the allegations of financial misconduct brought against Richard Cole. Richard's attorney was the first to rise, his tone dripping with superiority. My client took this girl in when no one else would. Claims of abuse or theft are nothing more than the confused imaginings of a traumatized child. Sophie flinched at the words, but Shadow pressed closer against her leg, grounding her with quiet strength. Then Emma, former Navy officer, now attorney, rose with confidence. Her voice was steady, measured, and sharp as steel. Your Honor, we have uncovered evidence from Mr. Cole's own basement. Bank records, contracts, and forged documents, all proving deliberate theft of Sophie Hayes' inheritance. With a heavy thud, she dropped the stack of papers on the table. The crowd murmured. Richard's smirk faltered. The judge adjusted her glasses, examining the records. Mr. Cole, how do you explain these signatures? Richard shifted uncomfortably, beads of sweat forming at his temple. Forgeries. They planted those. Emma's eyes narrowed. We anticipated that excuse. Every document is matched to corresponding bank transfers, all traced directly to Mr. Cole's accounts. The evidence is undeniable. The air grew tense, and then Sophie stood. Her hands shook, but her gaze held steady, a quiet fire burning within. My father fought for this country, she said, her small voice wavering but clear. He promised I'd always be safe. But Richard hurt me. He lied. He took what my dad left for me. I just want my father's promise, to live safe and free, back. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge's stern expression softened. Shadow lifted his head, pressing his chin into Sophie's hand. The same comforting gesture her father had once taught. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack. The court rules in favor of Sophie Hayes. Richard Cole is stripped of guardianship and ordered to return all misappropriated funds. Richard exploded, slamming his fist against the table. But deputies closed in quickly, his shouts drowned out by the snap of handcuffs locking around his wrists. Daniel released a slow breath, years of guilt and silence lifting with it. Shadow leaned against Sophie, his tail thumping gently against the floor. The battle was over, and they had won. Weeks slipped by, and the bitter chill of winter gave way to softer spring sunlight. Sophie now lived in a small apartment arranged through Emma and the Veterans Network. It wasn't extravagant, but it was safe. More importantly, it was hers. Moving day turned into a celebration. Veterans who had once fought side by side now carried boxes, trading jokes and laughter as though the burdens of the past had finally eased. Sophie giggled as Shadow padded along beside her, occasionally nudging at a stray balloon someone had brought to brighten the moment. Inside, the apartment smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Sophie's laughter rang down the hallway, lighter and freer than Daniel had ever heard before. For years, his world had been defined by silence. Now that silence was broken, not by war, but by the sound of a child rediscovering joy. That afternoon, Sophie sprawled across a soft rug, giggling as she played tug-of-war with Shadow. Her joyful laughter rang through the room as the German shepherd tugged at the toy with gentle care, making sure not to hurt her. His tail wagged with boundless energy. In that moment, Daniel saw more than a soldier's companion. He saw a guardian who had become simply a friend. Emma leaned against the doorway, smiling softly. He wasn't just her dog anymore. He was part of the family. Daniel gave a slow nod, his eyes moving from Sophie to Shadow, and then to the framed photograph resting on the shelf. Michael, dressed in uniform, smiled back with the same fire that once carried him across the battlefield. For years, Daniel had carried survivor's guilt like a weight that never lifted. He had sworn to Michael that he would protect his loved ones, but deep down, he believed he had failed. Now, watching Sophie's laughter as Shadow stayed by her side, Daniel saw the truth. He had never borne that promise alone. Shadow had been there all along, feeling Sophie's pain when the storm raged, keeping her safe from danger and uncovering the truths others tried to hide. The promise had been shared, bound not just by duty, but by love. Together, man, dog, and the memory of a fallen friend had forged a bond stronger than loss. As the sunset poured golden light into the room, Daniel placed his hand gently on Shadow's back. The dog leaned into him, steady and reassuring. For the first time in years, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. A soldier may fall, but true loyalty endures beyond the grave. Sometimes it returns in unexpected forms, on four paws, carrying not only duty, but the power to mend broken hearts. Shadow's journey with Daniel and Sophie stands as a reminder that courage and loyalty can transform lives in ways words alone cannot capture.